everyone, and welcome once again to the conversation. I'm your host, Noelle Carmen, and today we are talking about interventions. Get ready and hold on to your hats because this is gonna be a good one. So we've all seen the show, but we're here to dive a little more deeply into the process and what we need to know as clinicians with regards to clients and family through the entire process. So we have an incredible panel of intervention experts with us today. I want to welcome, and this is a long list, so I'm reading this. I want to welcome Tim Ryan. He is a speaker and an author, and he wrote Dope to Hope. Do you have the book to hold up for us?
I sure do.
If you do, that's great. He is, okay, there it is, Dope to Hope. He is A&E's dope man. Hopefully we will find a little bit more out about that. We also have Jennifer Gimenez.
Gimenez.
Say this again, what?
Gimenez.
Gimenez. Oh, my apologies. I'm so sorry. She is a supermodel, actress, and TV personality. And then we also have David Marion. He is a life recovery coach and a recovery advocate, and the author, I told you this was so long, of Addiction Rescue, the No BS Guide to Recovery. Will you hold up your book too so everybody can?
I don't have it, but I am an interventionist also.
Okay. He is also a spokesman for the CDC RX Awareness Campaign. Welcome everyone to the conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so let's just jump in and get all on the same page and just give us an overview from your perspective about intervention, so we can kind of just all start at the start line. David, you want to start the conversation?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, we were talking prior to, and as an interventionist on the front line fighting addiction, mental health, we're usually the last people called in. Usually the families have tried everything possible to intervene themselves, having that conversation. And until really you have somebody who is understanding the process of where they're at, meeting them where they're at, trying to get them off the elevator before the ground floor, the process could be daunting at times to most people. An intervention is a process where the family comes together because their loved one is struggling with self-destructive harms in ways that are really affecting not only them, but affecting the family as well. And, you know, when you're dealing with such things, people really don't know who to reach out to or how to reach out. They don't know what the situation is. A lot of times they want to call the police. They want to call social workers who really haven't had the same type of training that we have to be involved in something like this. And yeah, so it's quite the process that we're involved in.
Tim, Jennifer?
Why don't you throw the exact question back at me again?
Okay, so basically I want to get us all on the same page, just an overview of intervention, just to kind of add to what David said, so that when I start all my very deep and intriguing questions, that we're all starting kind of at the same place.
Go ahead, boss.
We are such a married couple. I'm so sorry for everyone's going, what are they doing? We're like monkeys on each other. So please chime in with when I'm saying this. I really believe that it's important for the addict or alcoholic who is suffering out there. And we come in to do an intervention to feel humanized, because they have been totally isolated. They have been, all the, shame, guilt, remorse around them. And to give them a no BS conversation. I remember once somebody said, you can't, BS a BSer. And so I was really hit me when they said that to me, because at that moment I realized, oh my God, they get me. Please chime in.
It's just what Dave and Jen, you are walking into, we're the last line of defense. So you are immediately walking into complete and utter chaos. Most of the times, if it's, a married family, a mom and dad, one's good cop, one's bad cop. So you're having to disseminate all that and get this into place. But the key factor with the intervention, yes, it's getting the loved one on the road to recovery, getting them safe in a medical detox or whatever. But that is just the beginning. It's working with the family and getting the family well while Johnny or Susie are getting help and treatment. But there are so much complexities, and you have to take the time to do it right. And All right, we need to bring in a mental health clinician expert on this one. And a lot of people half-ass things, and I don't like to use that word. And we're dealing with somebody's life here. And what Jen said, all these people want is connection and purpose and to be loved. That's it.
So one of the things I want to do throughout this entire conversation is tie the necessity for clinical to understand what is happening on the intervention during the intervention process. You said there's a lot of complexity. Is it important for clinical to understand your side of that complexity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a no-brainer.
To the best of their ability. I mean, I feel that if, one is not doesn't suffer from the disease of addiction or alcoholism, you'll never be able to get into an addict's mind. So I think the best of your ability to at least understand this disease.
There's a number of clinicians that are in recovery, but there's a lot that aren't. And I've done interventions, as I said earlier, with a clinician that helped write the DSM-5. And that clinician would say to families, look, you need to understand, I have the educational background. I know it better than anyone, but that person right there has lived it and he can get through to them there. I can't, but you have to work together. And I think what a lot of clinicians fear is, you got to understand, we do things to help people, but people need to make a living too. And I've seen a lot of clinicians then try to do the intervention. And no, if you have clients that are struggling, get intervention and get us involved. That way we can get them into treatment, get you as the therapist working with them while they're in treatment with their therapist. And then when they get out, because here's the biggest mistake I see, people go to a 90-day treatment program. Jennifer's my therapist. She's done a phenomenal job. Now I have to leave that treatment center. I can never talk to that therapist again. That's a huge hole in our system right now.
Well, I mean, I'll say really quick, I'm almost 16 years sober. In a month, I'll have 16 years sober. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And till this day, my two safe havens, my sponsor and my therapist. Thank God for them. Thank God for my therapist, and it's important, exactly what you're saying. And I'm going to chime into what Tim said really quick. I did cyber rehab and sober house shows with Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew always said, I have, Bob Forrest and Shelley and Jennifer on these shows because I'm the doctor, but I don't understand the brain. And I ask questions I need to know. And I think it's really important to ask questions too, if you don't know.
And we don't want to negate that clinicians don't have the ability. Okay.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the isolation, the loneliness, being withdrawn, being in that state. But the lived experience of having to go through this and being intervened on 30 years ago and knowing the pain that I was in, we get to relate with others that are going through this. And I think when you bring it back into the, not you talking to the person, but I have worked and I have gone through stuff like this. And let me tell you, I understand where you're at.
Dave, you hit on such a key point, and I'll end because I know there's a lot more questions. But one of the things the three of us are very good at doing is when we're working with, I'll use Johnny, the client or the guest that we're helping. I know Johnny's a 36-year-old heroin addict, alcoholic, but he's a successful business entrepreneur. I can give him 2 or 3 therapists that are going to work real well with them. It's also connecting people because some people don't work well with this therapist, but they want to keep them. And it's not, it's all what's in the best interest of the client is ultimately what it's all about.
So now I want to take the conversation and move it to a more granular level. Take us through, Tim, you mentioned chaos at the beginning. Take us through your experience of the initial contact with whomever is reaching out. What does that look like from an interventionist standpoint?
Well, I get right to the point because a lot of families, they're in crisis, but they want to give me a 20-year history. I want to get right to the point. What is the situation now? They've been up doing meth for 4 days, whatever the variable, so we can give them comfort and put together the team to come in and do what we need to do. But there's also so many other variables. Does the individual have insurance? What kind of insurance? Is it an HMO or a PPO? Can they cash pay? What are the options available for treatment? What's the best fit? So you're dancing all these things with your team and everything. It's an orchestrated dance. It's organized chaos. That's exactly what it is, but you have to have the right team of people in place.
Well, I think that's also important for us to know, like, I always ask like the parents or the loved ones, what are 3 things that were like life-changing for this person? Did they, get molested? Did something happen? And so when we're walking, another thing that I'm really adamant about is that I say, and now we say together, are you willing to go to the families? Like, are you willing to be on our side? We need everyone on the same page. Like, we're not here to because there's going to be pushing and pulling. You never know where it's going to go. So we walk in, we have a house of cards, like hand of cards in our hands of what we know. We walk in with love and grace. And then, here we are if we have to throw those cards down.
So it sounds like what you're saying is there's really 2 main aspects. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've got the financial piece in terms of what that planning, you have to use that as the foundation for planning what is about to happen. But then you've also got this emotional piece. It sounds like, Jennifer, you're talking about, okay, we do need to know some of what's going on in terms of what kind of trauma are we looking at. So both those pieces fit together. David, do you also look at both of those pieces?
Oh, absolutely. I think part of the assessment process on the initial consultation is acquiring as much information as possible, right? We want to know about what type of trauma, if there is any trauma. Obviously, it's often said that people with addiction usually always have trauma, but people with trauma aren't always addicted, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, something happened. Trauma being not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Right.
And we begin to understand that. We want to know the dynamics initially in the initial consult. What are they using? How often are they using? What behaviors? Are there consequences yet? Are there legal consequences? DWIs, loss of jobs? What is it? And we get as much information possible to assess that situation prior to the next steps. The next steps obviously being who's going to be involved in the intervention. And that's another piece.
Yeah, that's
another piece.
Yep.
We also want to make sure, I've done interventions where there's been people in there and saying, well, this is a little hypocrisy. We used together back in college and, all of a sudden you're intervening and you should be in treatment. So you have to really be careful on who you want to pick in a situation.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on Dave because it's crucial. Once they're agreeing to move forward and we're doing the things on the phone and talking with here and we got 3 brothers and 2 sisters and Johnny and Aunt Susie. Once I've talked to all them, I might realize, no, those 3 aren't coming to the intervention because they're going to throw it sideways. Because when we also come in, if Dave's running lead, Dave's the director. He runs first chair. And Jennifer, if we're doing the intervention with him, we follow his lead and he runs the entire show. And there's no voice raising in this. And it's a dance. That's what it is. And it's a dance that a majority of the times is very successful. Rarely do we have people not going. If they don't, they're usually going in a week or 2 or a month. You rarely don't have people that ultimately don't go. The only reason they don't go is they waited too long and they die.
So all of these decisions in this information gathering process actually create the foundation of the success of the intervention itself. So it sounds like also you're deciding who's going to be there, but you need buy-in as well. Jennifer, you mentioned that where it's like, okay, are you in? Are you going to give us trouble? And you're actually trying to weed out people and select who's going to make this a success at the end of the day.
Yeah. And also say, for example, mom and dad's not down, mom is, we are already working with dad before we even go into the intervention. And he's a little complacent, right? If he's not down at all, then we do not want him. But if he's a little complacent, we try to work with dad because ultimately we know dad's scared and he loves his son, daughter, you know, and they're going to want to do the best. They're just so, they've been dancing. I always say, addicts and alcoholics out there using, not only are they slowly killing themselves, they're slowly killing everybody they love around them slowly. So we are dying with them, And
it's getting the families. One of the key aspects, and I know Dave's a huge proponent of this, is all right, we got me, I'm Tim, Dave and Jen did my intervention, I'm going to treatment, but we have got to get the family on the same page and they need to be doing the work because there's also times too, we do the intervention, get them into treatment. We realize it's not a good environment for them to go back home. Now we have to shift. You know what? Now they're going with a sober companion for 90 days or into a structured sober living. And it depends. Are they college? Are they a business professional? Where do they fit into the spectrum of life to make sure it's there's so many pieces. People really don't understand the complexity that goes into doing interventions.
But having a clinician on board with us, and that doesn't happen all the time, you know, but when we do have people, clinicians on, we are so happy because it's like, it aligns everything so much easier for the actual person that needs help.
I want to reiterate
Smooth
that.
transition, exactly.
We always have a clinician involved.
Yeah,
They might
but-
not actually be on site doing the intervention. I want to reiterate that.
Thank you.
Right, the coordination between us and them is so important. Obviously, you're looking at facilities and there might be a bed wait, right? So we're going to plan the intervention the day we know that bed is available, because right after the intervention, that's where they're going. It's not going to be a 2-day wait and okay, grab your stuff and 2 days, you know, the next day never happens. And we've gone through many of those, and overcoming that with there won't be a bed tomorrow or something like that.
Because those are the things where you brought up a scenario. We had to go peak of COVID, fly to Ann Arbor, Michigan to do an intervention. We had to meet with the board of directors and ready to take this guy off the company chairman board if he doesn't get help. Well, then the flights, we had to coordinate it with flights, and there wasn't many to do the intervention, to get them on the plane. They don't serve alcohol on the plane, to get them there safely. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff involved.
It has to be challenging relying on an emotional family who's coming to you, like you said, with the whole family history. Are there red flags where you will not take a case, where people have come to you and the mother's like, my son is doing this and this is happening, and you're like, okay, we're out.
I'll be the first to say, I don't know if it's correct or not, but I do not do interventions alone. I will not. I am a female at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. And I cannot do it alone. I've said no many times.
But there's cases that are, it's just different variables. Now, I turn a lot of things down for different reasons, or it needs to be referred out. It's more complex than we first saw it. Or here's one thing that happens, unfortunately, is not a lot, but I had a mother, I did an intervention 4 or 5 years ago, got her child into treatment, and then the mom was calling the treatment center 25, 30 times a day. And I finally called her and I said, look, your kid's in treatment. He's on a 5-day black. I need to talk to him. Well, I found out the mom was the issue. Then we had to flip everything and get him to not go home, to go to sober living. And now he's doing great, but he still doesn't have a relationship with his mom because she was keeping him high the whole time. And we never knew that. So yeah, Dave can talk on it too.
Yeah, I'm probably certifiably nuts. There's not a lot of cases I don't turn down. You ask us what we do for a living. We're hope salespeople, right? We're selling hope to people that are feeling hopeless. And if I can't dispense a message on them and bring something to them, 2 weeks ago, I was in Naples, Florida, doing an intervention that was one of the toughest ones I've ever done. We woke the son up at 10 a.m. and usually I like to start a little earlier than that, completely defiant, in a manic state, crazed, threatening the mom and the dad, who are divorced for years. There was 2 ex-Chicago cops as their friends there, and this thing could have really gone nuts. I pulled him aside and I had to talk with him. And I said, listen, all we're looking to do is just talk to you for an hour. Your family and friends have read some letters to you, and that's all we want to do. We're not asking you to do anything except to listen to some of these letters. Can I go smoke first? Yeah, go have 2 cigarettes and come back. I went outside with him. He came back and he listened. He still wouldn't go to treatment until, it took 8 hours before he finally submitted. But we have to understand, usually what we see is fear, the resentment, the anger, the frustration, anxiety. And I sit there, and after 2-3 hours, they looked at me and said, he's not going. I said, go grab a Milky Way. We're going to be here a little bit. After 4 hours, they said, he's not going. And I said, he's getting a lot closer, because we have to clear all that out of the way, because what lies below that is submission and surrender. And if you're willing to wait long enough to get there, you will get there at times.
And that's a great point, because we've had interventions literally walk in and we're leaving with the person in a half an hour. I've had them take up to 18 hours, but you got to work and you have to explain this. I mean,
So I normally will pull the person aside, especially if it's a female, be like, can I have time alone? And then I just shoot. I always say shoot from the hip, right? And then we have we're on the same dialogue, and it's like, listen, if you don't want to do this, tell me. I'm not here to like force it down you, because I would rather have that opportunity the next day to work on that person. But we've always been able to get them
I'm
to
going
go.
in, I go in, I'm getting them.
And just to reiterate about who I've said no to in the past, I think we've gotten calls for a meth addict, a male meth addict, not kind of my place to be in. And so
No, there was two brothers.
Oh, it was
at
two
the same
brothers.
time.
Yeah, that's what it was. Two
but,
guys. Yeah. So that kind of thing I wouldn't jump into.
I think you have to know also when you're using different drugs, like you can't reach a meth addict when they're high.
No.
You have to reach them when they come down. And you have that short window. It might be 3 days, right? That's when you have to reach them.
And sometimes
you said something very key there, because it's different drugs, different time slots. And it's so important for us to keep that in mind as a team.
Yeah, you have to time an alcoholic. I mean, I can't go and do an intervention if the guy's blacked out. He's not going to know a thing. I need to hit him in the morning when he's had 1 or 2 beers by 7 a.m. and then we're go, but
and make sure he's not going to withdraw.
Right. Yeah, I got a call from a family. We're going to do it with their loved one who was a meth addict. And they said he got arrested last night. It's the middle of winter. I said, for what? He said he was at 4 a.m. He was out mowing his lawn. What's wrong with that? Well, it's 4 a.m. There was 6 inches of snow on the grass. So it was a tough time to reach him,
That's
Yeah.
So let's talk about location. You've prepped the family, you've decided a few things. So you go, do you choose to go into a home? Do you go into a public space? Are you going into that home and taking doors off of hinges? How do you
watch
make
too many movies? Watch too many movies.
So talk us through that. We've all seen the movies. We're trying to get the truth from you.
From one actually walking in to do interventions.
Yeah, like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to do it in your living room.
But yeah, I mean, I go to the person's home where they're at.
Okay.
Apartment, condo, whatever. It depends, but I usually go to them instead of, there's different types of interventions. I mean, there's people that invite people to the intervention. I don't do that. That's not my style, especially with fentanyl. There's no time to wait. People are friggin' dying. I mean, believe me, today is I
think we're very cautious. So like the last intervention that we did, you did a lot of, you don't know whose house you're really walking into. I mean, you're literally walking in, blindsided, but you're hoping that it goes, you could tell by the conversations you've had with the family of the loved ones. And it's always kind of best not to have it, I feel like, in the addict's house, per se, if they're actively using. I mean, you want to try to get, like we got recently a family, we had the girl go in Boston. We had the girl
go to the parents' house.
Go to the parents' house.
We had to put a ruse that they were watching the kids. But so here's unfortunately the issue with doing interventions with the supermodel or being on TV. We're doing this intervention in New Hampshire, and 35-year-old female. So the parents have got her kids and she's coming to pick up the kids, and it was her birthday and she's loaded. She walks into the house and sees Jennifer. Then her favorite movie is Blow, and her favorite TV show is Beverly Hills Housewives. My wife's been in both. And she looks at her and she said, "Oh my God, I know you." But then it was about 5 seconds. She goes, "What are you doing in my house?" And I said, "I'm Tim Ryan. This is my wife, Jennifer. We're here to talk to you about your drinking issues." And she ran out and sat in her car for an hour and a half and mother effing us, but I had it blocked in, and she just looked at Jen and she turned off the car. She said, "You're really good." And Jen said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Because I should have drove through the fence an hour and a half ago, but I'm willing to listen. Let's go in the house and talk." And she went to treatment and is sober and has a great life today. So, but it's not all that way. There's so much.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think really what Jen touched on is something important. The importance of doing it, and pre-COVID, I was doing them at a hotel conference room, third-party location. If you walk into somebody's house, an active user, there's certain things you want to find out first. Number one, are there weapons in the home? Are there guns? Are there loaded guns? Do they have availability to knives, to the bows, things like that? Because they could go awry. And I want to know all that prior to. And prior to, if there are weapons there, I'm going to have the family remove them. So, yeah, that's a really important point, Noelle.
I mean, the crazy thing with the system, 3 months ago, Jen and I were in Florida, and I had to fly to California to do an intervention. for an individual in a mental health crisis. But the sad fact was I was working with the police for 3 days. They didn't know what to do. I had to fly in, go meet with the police first and get everything put into place, and everything worked out, and had to get the individual 5150. But the sad fact is our system, a lot of people don't know what to do. So when you're coming in and God forbid law enforcement might be needed or called, we have to go meet with them first. And you never want people getting caught off guard on any scenario that can happen. So I had to lay it all out, and this is what we're doing, and everything worked. But you learn this through trials and error, and through learning and mentors, and not, you can't do this half-assed. I mean, it's life and death.
Tell us a little bit about the family dynamic as you're getting ready. It's imminent. The intervention is imminent. Are you seating people in a certain way? Is everyone sitting in the room? I would imagine for at least some of the interventions, okay, I'm putting mom here, I'm putting dad here, I'm putting the person they don't like over here. What does that look like, and what are your rules around that?
I like that you asked about mom and dad part, because, you know, I was going to say, at first I was going to say, no, it doesn't matter. We want them to be normal and as present as possible. But no, you do want the loved one right next to them. I was thinking about the placement that we did. You do want the loved one, the ones that they're closest to, that they could feel safest with.
If they have a good, it's all the assessment up front. Dad sits here, mom sits here, brother, no, and it just depends. Are you doing a sneak? Or some of the people are just cool. They walk in high as a kite. Hey, you trying to pull this shit again? Yeah. Okay, let's talk.
I like to emphasize to the family that as that moment is happening, that's the 30 seconds before moment is about to happen, is that they stay as present as possible. Don't go back into the pain of what happened, 2 years ago or yesterday, or that fear, because then they're not present. They're yelling, it gets out. We have to kick them out,
and
that
take
whole thing.
Control that either Jennifer is running the intervention and running the room, or Dave, or I am, or whoever. And it's letting the family know that, because the family has been trying to do something, they have no concept or ability and should have never been taught to do this. Families aren't interventionists,
So I believe that, well, when I do an intervention, I think it's really important, if the mom is so codependent with their loved one, I'm going to separate them. I'm going to have a blocker in between. I'm going to have them sitting on the other side of the blocker, someone who is not that really close with them. Because what I found is that when I have someone that's that close, they look at the mom and say, come on, mom, I'm not going to keep using, get me out of this, and trying to work the mom or the dad or whoever it might be. So I always separate them. And then I position them around the table the way we're supposed, the way I believe, after reading the impact letters prior to. Who's going to have the most impact on a situation like this? Who's going to be available, that I want them to really have the strongest words for them.
Right. And I think one of the key things too is, I'm jumping to this, but once we do that and get that dance, it's putting the contracts in place too, and educate when Johnny comes back home, you're going to have a sponsor, you're going to do this. I don't care if people are 35 years old living at mom and dad's house. They need to have a contract put in place for the first year or 6 months coming back home. Our house, our rules. If not, go to a sober living, Tell
us about those impact letters a little bit.
So it's just, usually to give you a brief on what the letter looks like that I have them write. The first paragraph might talk about what their loved one was like before they used drugs and alcohol, give specific examples. Remember the time we were up north at chasing frogs, or going to grandma's house and playing ball, or going to dance, how much fun they have, bringing them back into that moment. The second paragraph talks about how they've changed since they started using drugs and alcohol, and how that has changed them as a person. Again, specific examples: loss of jobs, DWI, being withdrawn, not coming to family events anymore, or coming and leaving right away. Things. Third paragraph might talk about, please accept this help and gift of desperation, and go to treatment today with David, Tim, or Jen, and talk about the love that you have for them. In short, that's a quick synopsis of what my letters look like. Theirs might be a little different.
All I have to say is I'd use 2 if I had to chase frogs. I'm just saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's basically what you're doing too with the impact letter is you're getting the family to take the time to put the pain on paper, And sometimes as they're reading it, they're breaking down or we're having to help them. But what else we're able to do with that impact letter is then pull out more to redirect to the person we're doing the intervention with. And you're just breaking them until they realize they are up against the wall. There's nowhere for them to go and they're out of options. So their best option is probably to walk out the door with us and start feeling better.
But it's so beautiful what you said though, Dave, about the connection, you know, the little details of chasing down and chasing the front. Like, it's so important to remember those good times, because when you're out there, you don't have any and you kind of lost it, or you're feeling that guilt and shame. So when you're hearing it from a loved one, it reinforces everything. And, you know, I think it's also really important because they see someone reading with, you know, to them, and that journey of writing and reading starts, you know, and the addicts, when they get better, alcoholic, they start writing things, you know, their clinicians are, you know, their therapists have them write things or do exercises, or their sponsors. And that whole beautiful cycle starts by that one letter that you have the family reading.
And you know what's interesting in those letters? They really are impact letters. They are meant to pull on the heartstrings of that person. And we have to be really, really versed in nonverbal communication. So when a person is reading that letter, I am focusing on the person that we're intervening on also. I'm watching what's happening with them, the emotion coming out, the swallowing, the holding back. In the pre-intervention process, which is just the role playing of everything that's going to go on the next day during the intervention, there's still tears like you wouldn't believe. And I've done interventions on many professional athletes that, you know, I'm a big guy and they're calling me Tiny. Take it easy, Tiny, you know, because that's how powerful this is. And people are going to tell us something that we always hear. I've never shared this with anybody before, you know, but I feel comfortable in this situation talking to you about this.
So Dave, the point Dave brings up there too then is now they're ready to go. But Dave's built this relationship and pulled more information out of them that we didn't know. And once he's at XYZ treatment center, Dave is able to work with the clinicians and the clinical director to share that information. And it's able to help the client immensely, because you got to understand, I'm an alcoholic or drug addict. Some big schmo and this lady just walked in. Now I'm sitting in detox somewhere. And you think I'm going to be honest? I swear I only drink 4 beers a day and snort a 1/4 gram of cocaine. That's it, you know? So it's then you got the factors to lay it out, then you can get down to the causes and conditions.
And talking about,
oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. Some of the insurance companies we work with, interestingly enough, need a pre-authorization prior to, which really makes it doing an intervention, then doing the pre-auth afterwards. So now you did the intervention, they accept going, and they have to call in for the pre-authorization for the insurance company, which might take 24 to 72 hours. Okay, well, what do we do with them now? What I usually do is I bring them to a detox, and I'll take them to a detox facility, and right from there, as soon as the authorization is complete from the insurance company accepting their insurance, then I will take them straight to the facility, which has really put a lot of, you know, it's a curveball, basically doing an intervention and then trying to have the pre-auth form. There's other ways, you know, they can put a deposit down, but usually they want to, if that's all they have, these are the only means they have is this insurance. Makes it a little tougher.
It does when you've got, you know, there's a fee for our services and we should be paid for what we do. But unfortunately, a lot of the families too, they're running a thin line on money, and then they can get our services, and they're finding out they got a $10,000 deductible. And it's frustrating too, because then you get the people that have really good insurance and they're paying, they'll find out, I've got an HMO, I'm only going to search for 14 to 21 days of treatment. It's where the therapists come in, big time. We really need the therapist involved, you know?
So it sounds like, just to back up just a little bit, there's a lot of intuition that happens in this intervention process. David, you mentioned watching their faces, getting the feel, the temperature of what's happening, because what you're hoping for is this transition to happen. If you're not paying attention to the transition, do you lose your moment?
Well, go ahead, Jen.
Really quick. I feel that with that, I think that as what you're saying about Dave watching and this and that, we're looking for a crack. We're looking for a place to come in. We're looking for like, and even if there's multiple, but if we only got one like thing, that breath, when the family member was reading to them and we saw them hold their breath there, okay, that's all we have to work with. Then we got to go with that. I mean, I think you got to go with what you have, but you are intuitive and you're very conscious and very present and watching everything. And again, we've lived it. So we know those sides and what that might possibly represent.
You're in the middle of an intervention. It's going well, except the mom, your client who is paying you says, you know, I think this was a bad idea. I think that we need to just shut all this down. I don't think we need to do this. How do you manage something like that?
I can tell them, well, my fee is $7,500 plus expenses for my wife and I, and you know, whether they choose to do it or not, but I will tell you, it cost me $25,000 to bury my kid. So, you know, I buried my own son due to this disease. It's actually would have been his 28th birthday today. Happy birthday, Nick, in heaven. But I tell it the way it is. I don't go telling people to mortgage their homes and all that. And I'll always go to any length, whether they have the resources or not, to get them the help. But you need to step.
When the parent, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
when the parent is complacent and it's like, I don't know, then we say that to, I'll say, babe, please tell him what it cost you, you know, and then we say, you're just in fear right now. You want him to stay sick, her to stay sick. Like, why would you want to stop this golden opportunity at this right moment for them to have?
Because they're in the disease with them.
Yeah, because they're in the disease. But the thing is, to have them pull away is to like let you know how sick the family really is. I always say our priority is to get the addict or alcoholic out of there, you know, in a safe place. The people that are most sick are the family members, the loved ones of the addict or alcoholic.
Right, because the addict has been afflicted and the family has been affected by this disease. And the effects play out in so many different ways, no matter what they will be. But as an interventionist, we have to be in total control in that room. If someone is really making this thing go a mess, it's our responsibility, A, to deal with them, and B, I have thrown people out of an intervention. I've asked them to leave, moms, dads, you know, did an intervention in New Haven, Connecticut, right before the pandemic, 31-year-old heroin addict, big Italian East Coast family, right? What does an East Coast family bring to an intervention? Food. They brought pasta fazool and ravioli and manigat. I said, what? Halfway through the intervention, their son gets up and he's just incensed, can't talk. He is fuming. His little 4'10" Italian mom looks at him and says, sit down. I said, Mom, take it easy. He runs out. We're in a hotel conference room in New Haven, Connecticut. Runs out to his vehicle. I follow him. I said, I'll go with him. Opens up the car door, grabs a cigarette, lights it up. Now he goes into his trunk, opens his trunk up. And my first thought is baseball bat, 3-iron, right? What's it going to be today? He grabs a pad and paper, still can't talk. And he begins to write. I'll call him Bobby. I said, Bobby, write, Bobby, write. Bobby begins to write. He rips this letter out. And it was about the physical and sexual abuse he endured as a child that not one family member knew in that room. I gave him a hug. I let him finish his cigarette. And he ended up coming back down, finished the intervention, took him to treatment. There's a blockage in the passage of people's recovery. And it's our responsibility to go deep in there and cleanse this stuff from the roots, not pull little leaves off the trees. You know, sometimes we got to bring a backhoe. We're going really deep in there.
You know,
it's true.
And there's been times, many times, I get vulnerable in an intervention. Jen does. I'll tell people, look, you know, I was molested. This happened. But I also got sober in a prison cell with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and another man willing to go through the steps and do this work with me. So if I could do that, I know you can do this, and that will just give them a little bit of spark. Hey, you know, here, you've got a chef or whatever the variable. It's just getting them to go. All they want to do is put their hand up and say, I need help. They just don't know how to ask for it. But one thing I wanted to bring up too, when I walked away, I forgot. One thing you need to take into consideration too, I'm originally from the Chicagoland area in Illinois. If I go to do an intervention with a 26-year-old that lives at home with his mom and dad, and he gets mail at that house, I cannot come in and do an intervention and say, you got two choices. You go to treatment or pack your stuff and get out, because he has to get a formal 30-day eviction notice from his mom and dad through the court systems. So in those situations, if we're using that as a bargaining tool, the parents are going to the court getting this because the kids think they're smart. We do the intervention and I slap that down and say, no, I'm going to go help you pack your stuff and I'll take you to the homeless shelter. You can go with me right now. That's your option. They always go with you.
Wow.
Other things that people don't know about. So you learn through trial and error too, unfortunately, in those things.
Tell us about how you track your client. Okay, you've dropped your client off at rehab. Now, what does your job look like in terms of tracking them, in terms of clinical communication, in terms of family communication, all those pieces? What does that look like for you?
Dave,
I'm usually on the release of information, right? So I want to track the progress. I want to get a report once a week, what's going on. I want to know the status. Once they come in there, the detoxification, how's that going, right? Are there any bad withdrawal symptoms that they're going through, the stuff that we need to be alerted to? And it's also the coordination with some of the therapists in the treatment, because we have a different assessment that we've received doing our work with the family and friends. And we want to talk to each one individually, knowing the relationship that you have with the person that we intervened on. Therefore, we could help assess. I've often got calls from treatment centers and say, well, this is what the treatment plan looks like, and this is what we're trying to do. What do you think? And I said, well, I might, add this, this, and this based off of, previous history and things like that.
And it's what is the family willing to do too? There's all the variables, but if you have the scenario, we like to get the families connected with the life coach immediately and a therapist for husband and wife if there's both of them. So we get that. Our case managers are basically coordinating everything. If we happen to be in Florida and they're in the program there, I'll go visit them, but it's keeping in touch with them.
And most people that we've all worked with, by the time we're done with that intervention, there's a bond that they and us we have together that is so thick that they want to check in with us and say they don't have us on the
release of information.
They'll check in with us. They always want to say like, look, I'm doing good. And we're like, it's such a beautiful thing to watch the journey unfold.
But it's also dependent on the clientele.
Yeah.
I mean, is it Dave? Is it a businessman that's a high functioning? He might need a sober companion with them for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We might then be doing sober coaching and working with some of these people for 6 to 12 months. It's just, what are they willing to submit to and willing to put in towards their recovery? We can give them all the scenarios and options, but it's what are they willing to do?
We have a question that just came in asking about the documentation. I'm assuming that through this entire process, you're having people sign things or making sure that everything, even per state, right? Do you have different things that you need to make sure that everything is in order in terms of documentation? What does that look like for you?
Dave?
So documentation, I have a contract that I send out to my clients prior to an intervention, right? You're talking about documentations as far as coordinating with the facility to
they didn't specify. Tammy asked this, but I'm assuming you've got documentation, and then you're on the ROI, and then is there documentation that you're needing to sign with the facilities as well? Like what does the full spectrum look like for you?
There's none if it is an ROI. If the ROI is in place, the client does all the signing of the information, who they're going to release, who they're going to, they might have somebody on a financial release of information. They might have someone on a treatment release of information, someone on a medical release. That's a documentation that's signed by the client, not by us.
Do you find the facilities easy to work with? And have you ever had a situation where they're like, okay, we've got it from here. We're good. Thanks for the handoff.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Well, to say that no one's ever had that would be
no. So between my wife and I, we've probably stepped foot in 2,500 treatment centers nationwide, speaking, doing interventions, whatever. I only work with a select few programs. I mean, there's 35,000 treatment centers in the United States through nonprofit, for-profit, faith-based, Christian-based. There's probably 15 I work with, and that's it. And we have solid relationships, and a lot are heavy trauma focused, female focused. And then you've got your 18 to 26-year-olds. Where do they fit in best? And do they have mental health? But that's it. And we have excellent relationships with these programs because they're our go-to places. And they're the ones that we're seeing the people get well.
Yeah. I don't think that's ever happened that they said, okay, thank you. We'll take it from here, because I would never have that relationship with a treatment center like that.
Yeah.
If they were willing to take it and not talk to us about what's going on in there, then I wouldn't be interested in dealing with a facility like that. And like Tim said, there's so many facilities out there, and it's our job to pick out a couple that we really believe, based on the assessment, is going to treat the diagnosis for the client themselves, right? Are they dealing with mental health issues? What are the mental health issues? Has been diagnosed with bipolar personality disorder, OCD, and addiction. Okay, many places say that they could treat them. You go on the website, boy, they can write up a spiel that is going to sell you. But for me, and like Tim and Jen, I have been to many facilities, gone to many professional weekends, drop people off. And what I usually do when I'm at a facility, the way I get a temperature check, a barometer check, I see the spirit of a client in there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the client. If they've been there 3 weeks and I could see this illuminating spirit, and they feel so good that they want to go help somebody else, and they feel so good about their recovery, that's really enticing to me.
That's what it's all about. And, it was trial and tribulations. And Jen and I, when I moved out to Los Angeles with Jen 3 years ago, all these programs, so I'll go visit them, and we're visiting this place, and on their website, trauma specific, blah, blah, blah. So I talked to the clinical director, and I said, so tell me about your trauma work here. Are you doing EMDR? Are your people trained? Are they certified? I said, there's a huge difference, and blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh yeah, trauma. We really don't address that here. We're just detox and rest. So they're only like 30 to 45 days, but we'll refer them out. I said, but on your website, it says you do trauma. Well, we just kind of want to get them in the door. That's 90,
we don't want to open those wounds.
That's 90% of the treatment centers in the United States
were like,
of America.
What? You don't want to open their wounds. They're walking in with wounds.
But stop, Jen, there was a question, and I want you to answer this because this is right in your wheelhouse with what you say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm jumping in here, but I saw
that's
that.
okay. I was about to bring it up. Okay. So the question is, you have someone who has been to treatment facilities multiple times, but continues to struggle with addiction. How does intervention play into someone who's in that kind of a situation?
Well, like one thing you say is everybody doesn't need to go to treatment.
So good. I love that you're like, answer, and then he answered.
I didn't know if you were going to say
Such a married couple. What do you do? So can you repeat that again, the last part of it?
Person that's been to treatment multiple times.
How does intervention
sober, how do we get involved?
Okay, so I really do believe that some of us have the gene, and we have, some people have a problem drinking. You deal with the problem, and they no longer have a drinking problem. And then you have people like me who have it all, right? And I'm very open about it. I have mental health and I have addiction, and I could not stay sober. Started getting sober at 21, could not stay sober. I'm 44 right now. I don't like talking about it, but I'm almost 16 years sober. So in my late 20s, there I was at the bottom of the barrel. And yet again, I couldn't stay sober. And I went to treatment. I relapsed, went back, and that was it. That treatment, it was the only thing that I thought that I was like, I might as well just try it. I might as well just do it their way. And, I still had the intent that it wasn't going to work, but it ended up working, and I just think that treatment, you do that intervention, you keep working with that client that's out there and cannot they will come to you when they're ready.
If they make it, if they don't die.
The crazy thing about me 16 years ago opposed to today, and I constantly talk to Tim about it, is It's mind blowing to me that we are today in this day and age, addicts and alcoholics are not like, they're not playing Russian roulette with just one bullet, a loaded gun.
Yeah.
That's using today.
To answer the question from my perspective is the client's probably been going to the wrong treatment centers. If they go again, minimum 90-day, but you need a 6 to 12 month program. Hold on. I don't mean to cut you off because my ADHD throws, but in a situation like that on the client, say it was Jen, I just pick on her. Dave and I could come in and maybe they need an in-home detox, but it's getting them connected with the life coach, the therapist, and the recovery team. And they have an option, but it's getting them to buy in and do it and not co-signing their bullshit. Some people just aren't ready. I know people that have been to treatment 30 times and now they're sober. People have went once, some have. So by
the time I left treatment, my whole treatment stint was almost 9 months. By the time I left treatment, I do not believe everybody needs treatment. I do not. I think that some people, I think that at that point, some people also need to go to a boot camp, like a 6-month, 9-month boot camp, 12-step boot camp. At that point, those things are what's going to thoroughly help them stay sober and get sober and stay sober. Because staying stopped is the hard part for someone who's constantly coming back in.
I'll answer with this, and I know Dave wants time. And my son had been to treatment 6 times. He knew what to do. He had been to sober living. He chose to get high again and died. And the reason is he never had a foundation for recovery. If I would have known what I knew 7, 8 years ago when he died, I would have got him out of state. I would have got him into a year-long program. I always had great insurance. I just didn't know what I didn't know.
So another question came in, Noelle, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm on it. So this happens all the time. We see this in the industry where the family goes, here's our problem. This is the person in our family that is struggling with addiction. Could you kindly please fix them and get back with us when that's all wrapped up? Would you? So the families don't understand they're actually part of the dynamic, right? So can you talk about that just a little bit? Like, hey, we need a quick fix on this. Could you, we've tried, we're throwing this problem your way. Get on that. Let us know when the problem is taken care of. How do you deal with that, David?
Well, it's interesting because I look at the families also and I say, your son didn't have a bad weekend of drinking, right? He had a bad couple of decades. So if you think this is going to happen in a couple of weeks, getting this thing, and families look at me and say, I don't see any changes in them.
Oh gosh.
Stop looking for the changes in them rather than the changes in you. What are you doing at the same time? Because addiction is a family disease and the recovery is a journey. So independently and collectively, we all have a responsibility to look at our part in this. And I say, once they start pointing the finger, I said, obviously, you're not looking at yourself anymore. So how do they begin to work on themselves? We have an opportunity to dispense a message to their loved ones on how do we dismember and dismantle the power of this obsession. But at the same time, they think that once their loved one gets fixed or healed or cleanses or rinses off or taps into the spirit of recovery, right, their life is going to be fine. But then again, the family loses that title. The mom was the enabler. She was codependent. She was this. She was doing this. And then all of a sudden, the loved one doesn't need their help anymore. And they're kicking and screaming like a stuck pig in a pen.
It depends too. You run in Jennifer circles and some of the interventions she's pulled me into with, high-end, very wealthy celebrity families. A lot of times they don't care. They just throw money at it. But that's where in those situations, we put the right team in place. I mean, we get them plugged into the recovery community and feeling that they can be well, but sometimes families just say, I've had it. I'm done.
Listen,
here, I'll write you a check.
I was going to let you guys answer and then say there are many times that I have had family members in the past before Tim and I got together that they would say, like, I can't do this. I want nothing to do with I'm not going to do any therapy and nothing. I'm out.
I'm done with it.
And my primary purpose at this moment is to help the addict or alcoholic or the person in early recovery. And that means, and that's what they did to me too. You focus on you. And my family and I was loved. I'm grateful to say that. But we had an intertwined, dysfunctional relationship. And I had to work extremely hard to make it work healthy. And so it takes a while. So if the addict or if that family member doesn't want to do it, then all right, get away from the person in treatment, because we're going to help them.
I'm aware of the time, and I don't want to end without addressing this, which is what, from your perspective as interventionists, do you want the clinical world to know? What do you want clinicians to take away from your experience and the possible relationship you can build with clinicians?
I'll say from my perspective, majority of the knowledge I've learned in this industry is from clinicians, that I ask questions. I'm constantly talking and reading, but we're all in this together here. And I see people in different islands. They might have been in private practice or treatment, or they're doing this. And we're just working together here to fulfill the need of our guest or our client, to get people well. And that's what we do. And all it takes is a phone call, but also be cautious of who you're working with. What I've noticed in the past 8 years is everyone's an interventionist, a sober coach, a life coach, a speaker, a sober companion. Do your due diligence. Make sure they carry insurance, that they've got the, the proper time out there and can help. I mean, I look at Dave, there's only a few select people I would call to help. And Dave's one of them, Jen's one of them. That's it.
How does a clinician know? Seriously, give us some tips on selecting a good interventionist. What are the hallmarks?
There isn't, because everyone's different. And a lot of it is personality. But I look at, if I'm going to hire an interventionist or refer one, I want the person that's going to get my client well, that's going to go in and get them into treatment. So me as a therapist, I can start working with them again and get clarity. I don't want these there's too much song and dance out there, I think. And, I just keep my circle small, and hey, if you want to use someone else, more power to you. But a lot of times they call us back because we come in to clean up the messes.
And I think the question also that you asked before with the clinicians, for me, it's easy. We stay in our lane. I know what I am good at. I'm not trying to be a clinician, I'm not trying to be a therapist. I'm not trying to do something I can't. And at the same time, I know as an interventionist what my job is on the front line fighting, right? Addiction. We're the guys and gals that want the ball with 10 seconds left in our hand, okay? Because we might be the lifeline between them dying and recovery. And once I bring them to a safe place, I want the clinicians to do exactly what they can do. Treat them and love them until they can love themselves, and teach them this.
To kind of chime into what you're saying, Dave, on that, is that I think it's important. It's kind of where I started from earlier, is that for me, my sponsor and my therapist 16 years later is like everything. I mean, like every word a clinician says, when we're ready for that, when we have that moment, you have like, sometimes we just have that millisecond, right? The words that you say matter to me. The guidance you give me matters to me. So I know people really need you. We all need you. So thank you for existing and doing this.
She's saying that because we had therapy appointments yesterday. And I'm all kidding aside, 2.5 years ago, Jen says, Tim, have you ever talked to a therapist? I said, yeah, I did when my son died and all this. She said, I think you should talk to one. So anyhow, I got one. And I'm telling you what, it's the best. It took my recovery and my life to a whole different level. Because my therapist, I think I'm coming to talk about this and we're going this way, but it works. And I suggest everyone, especially therapists and clinicians, get a therapist, see one, because the most important thing for all of us is our own self-care, so we can work cohesively together to keep people.
I have gotten burnt out in this industry, and I needed that self-care for our clinicians, for all members in this field, is so important.
What a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you, David, Tim, Jennifer, for being here and just being so real and authentic. It just was a lovely conversation. Please know, everyone who's joined in the conversation, you will have all of their contact information. You will be able to reach out, follow up with questions, and get the help you need. We have excellent interventionists right here in front of you. If you're waiting for your CE email, that will arrive on Monday. And otherwise, it is almost Friday. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Thank you, everyone, for joining
Thank
in the
you.
conversation.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Bye.